Greetings, everyone, and welcome to today's RAPS webcast entitled Ensure Regulatory Compliance of Artwork and Labeling Through Advanced Digital Processes, sponsored by Kallik. Before we start, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items. First is to remind attendees that to receive credit for this event, you will need the completion code that will be shared with you at the end of the webcast. We will post the code in the chat box at the conclusion of the webinar. If you miss the code in the meeting, don't worry. It will also be shared in an email that will be distributed to all attendees from the Zoom platform 24 hours after the event. To submit your completion code, log into the RAPS Learning portal, and on the homepage, you will see a box on the right of the screen where you can enter the code. Use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to ask questions to our presenters about the content of the webcast. RAPS will use the chat box for announcements and to receive any technical issues audience members may have. At the conclusion of the webcast, you will receive a link to the post-event survey. Please take a few moments to complete it for us. And finally, this webcast is being recorded and will be available on the RAPS Learning portal 48 hours after the event. And now I'd like to introduce you to our speakers today, Gurdeep Singh, CEO of Kallik, and John Blake, Director Analyst of Gartner. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Robin. Good morning, good afternoon. Let me start off by just saying thank you to RAPS for giving us the opportunity today to be able to present to you. My name's Gurdeep Singh. I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at Kallik. Joining me today is John Blake, Senior Director and Analyst at Gartner. We're really excited to talk to you today about the regulatory compliance, how you ensure regulatory compliance in your artwork management and labeling processes, and how you do that really using advanced digital processes. So I'm going to now hand over to John to kick us off, and then I will follow up with John shortly after. So John, may I hand over to you, please?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Gurdeep. Let me just pull up our slides here. All right, well, thank you. So I appreciate the opportunity to join you and to join the RAPS organization here to talk about labeling and artwork and ensuring regulatory compliance. So for those of you not familiar with Gartner, Gartner is the world's leading research and advisory company. So Gartner was founded back in the late 70s. Anyone kind of very much in the IT space is very much familiar with the Gartner name. I work in the supply chain research, and Gartner now covers pretty much all functions and industries across the board. And one of the areas that I've been covering for the past 5 years is the area of label and artwork management. So within, Gartner, within our research, we define the label and artwork management as both a discipline and a network of applications that govern product packaging and product content data. And really want to emphasize, both a discipline and a network of applications, because there's a lot of individuals, there's a lot of functions that work through the different processes within our organizations. But there's also this growing network of digital tools, software applications that also complement and enhance the capabilities in this space. And label and artwork management, we traditionally think of it in 3 different areas. So we have what I think of as our traditional artwork management, which historically has been very brand-driven, marketing-driven. Enterprise labeling, on the other hand, historically has very much been focused on the back end, outbound shipments, labeling on could be medical devices, pharmaceuticals, things like that. And then there's an emerging space of what we refer to as electronic labeling, or in many cases, EIFUs is an aspect of that. So that's very much emerging. But what's interesting is we see these 3 kind of historically separate areas starting to merge together, right? So that starts to take into account a bit of expectations, right? So we really can't separate artwork and labeling, and we can't really separate anymore, having physical content and digital content. So all this is starting to merge together, which is a very interesting development. But what we'll talk about is many organizations are kind of struggling with this, right? So there's opportunities to become much more effective in this space. And what we find is that from a maturity standpoint and from our research that, most organizations, the majority of organizations are really sitting in that stage 1, 2, or 3 of a maturity model. So kind of, I would say regardless of industry, regardless of size of the company, the vast majority of organizations and functions within those organizations are just at that stage of identifying that they have a problem, in fact. So we start to get delays, cost overruns, recalls. That second stage is the firefighting stage, right? So we're starting to take action, but it's very much bottom-up initiative, right? It's not strategic in nature. It's really that firefighting. How do we prevent? How do we accelerate? How do we just get through the next project? And then that third stage is where we do see a bit more of bringing in technology, bringing in tools, but it tends to be done in a silo-oriented fashion. And what we mean by that is oftentimes a function or a part of our business will bring in an application, but that application is very siloed. In fact, many times we come across organizations that have multiple different tools focused on artwork and labeling, but their inability to share information across those. So they're very siloed. So really, we see the vast majority of companies in these earlier stages, again, regardless of industry or size of the company. And then really where we want to strive to get to is, moving towards the managed, which we think of as enterprise-wide label and artwork management, programs and processes and tools. And then there is the aspect that there's always room for constant improvement, right? So where organizations just focus on optimizing as needs, as technologies, as requests and requirements change. So, interestingly, still, I would say this is an emerging space because the majority of organizations are in those early levels of maturity. So there's a lot of opportunity to grow and advance within that. And I think, one of the ways I think about this is that organizations are living essentially a digital double life. So I think about, what we have, in our homes, our pictures are stored on the cloud now. We have cameras and our doorbells. We're streaming music, pretty much on the fly. But then when we go back into work and back into our business operations, there is still a tremendous amount of manual processes. These come to light in, utilization of spreadsheets, forwarding emails for information and approvals, even having printed copies that we distribute to be reviewed and signed off. So there's a real opportunity to, especially in the label and artwork management space, to bring those digital tools into those processes. And what we find is that the deficiencies in label and artwork management, do impact our business processes. So these are areas that I think if folks are on the call here, they're probably experiencing some of this pain and some of these issues, right? So we often see delays in launches as a result of inefficiencies in the processes. The recalls that occur, regulatory compliance issues. Oftentimes we have challenges because our customers or at a different country level regulations require specific information, and that tends to drive some struggle and some of the pain that we're seeing. But I'd say the good news is that there are solution providers out there, right? We're seeing an emergence of these types of applications being adopted within organizations. And, much of it is because we're outgrowing legacy systems, we're outgrowing homegrown systems, we're outgrowing these different tools and applications that are siloed, right? So, we are seeing the push, I would say in the past 18 months, from a research and an inquiry perspective, I've seen the most activity in this space that I've seen, since I've been, at Gartner covering this space. So there is, I think, not only a greater awareness, but a greater need to move to more advanced solutions in how we address our artwork and labeling content. So when we look at the market, so label and artwork management is really around, optimizing the workflow and compliance. So, we do see that digitization and optimization of the workflow, that helps to drive as well controlled aspects of our version control, having the visibility, having a single source of truth for what is the latest update, who made the update, why do they make the update. That helps to drive compliance. With that, certainly cost reduction related to preventing errors, speeding up approvals, and then driving that customer focus. Again, we see more and more very specific requests at that customer level as well as at the regulatory level. And, continually we see a lot of different, aspects that are driving the need here, right? We still, unfortunately, in the food and beverage space, we see mislabeling as a leading cause of recalls. I kind of think about this as, for all the effort that we put into the product development, our manufacturing, our protocols, to have, missing information or incorrect information at that final point of production and distribution being a leading cause of recalls in food and beverage. It's, it's very frustrating. It's something that we think about all the work and effort and expense put in. And as well, we see mislabeling as one of the leading causes of recalls as well in the life sciences industry. So, this gets to the processes, inability to just make sure that we have all the digitized content approved all the way through to the point of manufacturing and production. And that's what's really critical. And what we find is that, one of the key things is that when we move to these, newer application, digitized tools, we eliminate that reliance on the manual processes. And those manual processes tend to come in the form of email, spreadsheets, again, these data silos. And what we start to enable is flexibility, so we can manage information across multiple functions, in fact, multiple sites, in fact, even do it globally. The applications are scalable, so kind of moving away from a single desktop or a single site, a single server, right? And there's an aspect of composability, so how we can identify, adapt, and utilize the data. And I'll speak about that concept of composability in a few minutes. And if we look at the market direction, one of the things that's been very interesting, so within the Gartner research, we do a social media analytics. So what we're doing is monitoring on an annual basis, what is the chatter, what are the key trends that are out there. And as we finalized the research in 2022, we saw that enterprise labeling went up to the very top. It wasn't even in the top 8 in the previous 2 years. And much of that was driven by the emphasis and focus kind of coming out of COVID and requirements related there. But also we see regulatory requirements moving up into the top 3, regulatory compliance. And that again has been an increase in focus. I think much of it, due to resources, much of it due to cost. If we're late getting to market, we're losing revenue, right? So there's been a much greater emphasis there. And I think that's very much in line with the frequency of the types of inquiries and requests that I'm seeing, from the Gartner side, from a research and advisory standpoint, that the labeling and the regulatory compliance have been elevated. And one of the things related to cloud is that cloud helps to enable, many of these tools to get much greater scale. So, we see all three of those, coming forward, increased emphasis in our social media analytics review. And just to touch on the concept of composability, and this is something that, we need to have this within our tools and our processes, right? So I think the absence of composability, again, is another indicator that we have opportunity to improve our tools and applications. But it's also, I think, a way to explain to internal stakeholders, really what we need to be able to do with our content. Now, composability is a concept that it's used across manufacturing, it's used across software development, and I think it very much applies to how we manage data and content around artwork and labeling. And some of the key aspects of composability is that we need to have our data in ways that, initially that it's discoverable. So think about, why we have to go into spreadsheets is because that is how we manually identify information, right? So what we need to be able to do is discover that automatically, quickly, taking out the manual intervention. With that design of the tools and application, it provides autonomy of that information, right? So some of the things when we need to do updates in our labeling, or if there's a new regulation, if at a country level, let's say as an example, there's certain information that we need in our content that has to be accurate, has to be updated. When we have autonomy of that type of data, we can identify that and then in many cases just automatically update that, taking out again a lot of those manual types of processes, which can be costly, time consuming, and can be prone to mistakes. And we also have that concept of modularity and the concepts of orchestration, right? So this is how we can manage and manipulate the information and the data and the content. So these are, concepts or tools that we need to have in our processes. And as we think about how we operate today, where do these lack and where do we have the opportunity to incorporate them? That's really what we need to be thinking about when we're looking at how we improve and advance how we address labeling and artwork content to be more compliant with regulations going forward. And just a quick example of composability in our daily lives. I often use this example of music because, I use it because we often tend to get so bound in our existing processes, we kind of miss the art of the possible, right? And it's like, well, how can I, update, literally thousands of labels in hours instead of days and weeks, right? And I often think about or bring forward the idea of music, right? So, we have, the compact disc, for those of you who know what it is or remember what a compact disc is, a CD for music. I mean, that is digital music, right? It went from analog to digital on a compact disc. But we also have digital music in the form of streaming music services today, right? So if I think about if I wanted to share some music with, members of the audience here through a compact disc, that literally would probably take me, a week or two to get that music to you, right? So I would have to go find the music on the CD. I'd have to find a blank CD. I'd have to find a CD burner, which I have somewhere in a drawer in my office. I would burn those songs and have to mail it to you. So quite honestly, that would probably take about 2 weeks to do. But with streaming music, which is also digital music, but it's composable, I could give you the name of a song or an artist. I wouldn't even have to spell it correctly. And you could find it and be listening to it literally in seconds, right? So that's the power of composability. And we need to think about that in our business processes. We need to think about it, in this case, how we manage and utilize technology to emphasize, really improve our processes around artwork and labeling, right? And certainly that has benefits in the regulatory space. And when I think about, where should we start to, look at our own systems and processes and say, you know what, we're kind of working in the past, we're looking in legacy systems, we're running in process and operations that kind of put us at risk. So certainly, I'd say a red flag is reliance on spreadsheets and manual processes. Many times in my research, there, again, companies, regardless of industry or size, all too often there is some type of spreadsheet that is utilized. And that tends to be because we don't have the composable systems, we have siloed systems, and we have to default to that, right? So that certainly is a red flag. The data requirements just continually increase, right? Certainly through regulations, through customer requests, it's becoming incredibly complex. And oftentimes when, organizations are reaching out to Gartner, it's because they've reached that point, or they recognize they reached that point, that legacy systems can just no longer keep up. It's costing them, too much time, too much resources, or they're having other issues that are causing business problems. And certainly the inability for systems to, break down those silos is another key indicator. Anytime we have errors that are coming up, causing us issues, often related, captured in cost. And then, what I find oftentimes there's just an increased amount of labor and hours, and it might be through third parties that we're paying to update, the information and the content for us. So with that, just want to thank you, and thank you, Gurdeep and the RAPS organization for the opportunity here. You have some contact information if you want to reach out, and Gurdeep, I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Let me quickly share my screen. So I want to just really build upon what John has presented to the audience today. So let me just quickly reintroduce myself. My name is Gurdeep Singh. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of a company called Kallik. We are artwork management and labeling specialists. We provide a digital cloud-based platform that really enables companies to get to 100% regulatory compliant. It allows them to really be able to bring about a standard and a single way of really managing these processes. Ultimately that leads to a faster time to market. John talked a bit about how rapidly change needs to be made to get really products out there. But ultimately what we really do is help businesses improve their performance. And I always, when I talk to audiences, I always start really at sort of the basic level of why and what is it about artwork management and labeling that makes it so important. I met with a customer a few months back, and I was sitting down with them over a coffee, and they made a very sort of profound statement to me, which I guess I didn't really consider until that moment. And he said to me that if all of the labeling companies around the world just decided to stop one at any point in time, it wouldn't be very long before the world kind of came to a standstill. And I pondered over that. I thought, actually, that's a really, really important point. Every product that is out there has labeling around it. And when we talk about labeling, it's not just about the physical label on the product itself. It's the information around that product, the information for use leaflet, the packaging that goes around it. If you didn't know how to use that product, if you didn't know, let's say in a medical situation, a clinician using a piece of apparatus with not the right instructions, then it could cause serious harm. So actually labeling is so important, and it impacts everyone across the world pretty much, billion lives around the world every day. And companies really need to think differently, along the lines of what John talked about in terms of the digital maturity that you need in this space. Just being organized isn't good enough. And I'll talk a bit about a real life example in a moment, but the labeling and the artwork management needs to be an optimized, an integrated, and a strategic part of your business. I've got a model here, which is around digital maturity. It's very similar to what John has shared. It's a very common one. It's used by the US Office of Data Governance. And it really talks through 5 levels, where the mindset of an organization is quite informal when it comes to this, and how it then goes through levels of maturity, ultimately to get to being an integrated, being an optimized, and be most importantly, a strategic part of the business. As I said at the start, it's really important to think of this as a process that is beyond just the artwork management teams or the labeling teams or the supply chain teams. This fundamentally changes the game for you as an enterprise. Let me just share with you the very common picture that we see when we go out and we talk to companies. We see quite a bit of an informal mindset. That doesn't mean there isn't, processes in place in those organizations, but what we find is that there is a lot of reactive behavior. We see product recalls. Again, as I talk through one of the examples, this was a common problem they were facing. We see regulatory breaches. I mean, certainly if I think of the audience on the call today, this is, something that resonates with yourselves. It's really important to make sure the right information is on the right artwork, is on the right label, is on the right IFU. Not only it's right, it's also in compliance with the regulation of that nation or that jurisdiction. We've seen security breaches where labeling systems have come down, people have produced counterfeit products, people have made attacks, and actually, protecting your brand, your label is your brand, and really protecting that is quite important. And one of the things that we do see on a very, very regular basis is that a lot of the label and the artwork tends to be designed internally by an enterprise, but then passed off to an artwork agency who tends to kind of draw that, sometimes freehand, draw that in external tools. And there's this passing back and forth and manual processes that are all focused on trying to get it right. And as you can imagine, mistakes quite easily happen there. We see very little automation in this space. We see, siloed organization. When I first looked at artwork and labeling, when I joined Kallik, it was interesting to see that there was something like 8 or 9 different stakeholders that were involved in getting the label right. And, the regulatory affairs team was just one of those stakeholders. There are so many people that get involved in this process, and getting them to work together across regions, across different business units, that can be at times quite complicated and quite hard. And actually, the more people you involve, sometimes the more ways you find of doing things. So there wasn't any common or consistent ways of really doing this. And the other thing that, no surprise to you guys, is that the amount of change that is taking place, the enterprises that we work with, have got in the order of 80,000, 90,000 changes taking place. In fact, we had one global medical device company that alone had to make 90,000 changes in 1 year just to be compliant with European Union medical device regulations. And just trying to find those in your ecosystem, let alone change them, can be quite a daunting task. As a result, things become slow. You miss out on, really getting value of your product out there, generating further income, generating further revenue, and also getting products out there faster that you want to be able to do it. And one of the most, scariest things that we see is that investment only tends to go into these processes when things go wrong. There is a breach, there is a product recall, there is something that a product hasn't gone to market on its launch date. And as a result, investment goes in, often reactive to fix the problem, as opposed to really stepping back and really thinking of this as a level of digital maturity that you need in your enterprise. So what is it? What does optimized, integrated, and strategic, what does this nirvana of digital maturity really mean in this space? So we've broken down just a few points here just to give you, some insight of what does that look like in real terms world. So fundamentally, it's about having a tool, a technology, a digital process that goes and cuts through your enterprise. It's about having it that's a single design. It's about doing it the same way, regardless of where you are in the world. It's about delivering results where you are 100% compliant with regulation on your labels, on your IFUs, on all of your forms of packaging, and you're actually right first time. I've seen some examples of where labels have had 100 iterations just to get it right, and actually that isn't beneficial for anyone, let alone the enterprise that is responsible for that. You really want a solution that allows you a solution and a process for you to be able to do that right first time. And one of the most fundamental parts of being right first time, and John talked about this and really referred to this as composability, it's to think differently about what is your label, what is your artwork, what is your IFUs. Very often, we think of those as the finished product, but really we need to step back and think of them as data, think of them as content. And if you do think of it in a composability way, you can actually start to change your mindset, change the processes to be able to deliver the benefits and take error out the system. And in the example I'm going to share in a moment, I'll talk through exactly how you do that. As regulatory professionals on this call today, many of you being that, you'll be very interested, I'm sure, to know that you want to be able to audit everything, everything you do in this process, every interaction, every review, every approval, every decision, where it is in the process, absolutely needs to be visible to the enterprise, not only to know how to avoid errors, how to improve the capability, but most importantly, to give you insight into the business that allows you to be able to improve, as John shared in the Gartner model, that whole continuous improvement, that continuous learning and getting better and sharper to deliver better benefits ultimately to your customers, to your enterprise and to your colleagues as well. So the real art of the possible is to move up this value chain, become digitally mature and have an enterprise that is integrated and strategic across the world. So let me take you through an example of the art of the possible. So we are partners with a company called Teleflex. Teleflex is a medical device, a global medical device company. They are operating in various sort of areas from surgical, cardiology through respiratory. They really do cover quite a wide spectrum of medical services. They are an enterprise that is around the world. They have seen some significant growth, a lot of acquisitions taking place, lots of different brands coming to market. And as you can imagine, they had lots of different ways of doing this around the world, different sort of processes, procedures, systems. And no surprisingly, that was prone to potential errors, prone to mistakes. And fundamentally, they were really concerned about putting labels out there that ultimately would have led to product recalls, but also misinformation or inaccurate information for the consumers, for the patients, for the clinicians that use their products. So what they really wanted to do was really work with someone to help them really move up the trajectory of that digital maturity curve and get to the point where they were an enterprise that was optimizing these processes, integrated, and really looked at this being something very, very strategic to their whole enterprise. So what is it and what is the journey that they went through and how did really Kallik work with them? Really going back to what John said around composability, we go about through a 6-step digital maturity process with all of our customers. Ultimately, underneath it, there are a lot of transactional activities that take place, but ultimately, what we're really focused on is how do we make an enterprise digitally maturing the artwork management and the labeling space, and ultimately reap the benefits of being the best in class in this space. In step 1, step 2, and step 3, what we really do is we help these enterprises put their arms around the labels, the artwork, the assets that they have currently in place and they are using. And what we do is we bring them together into a single system of record that sits within that ecosystem. So it integrates with many other systems that they may use in their value chain, but it creates one single, very clean, approved set of content, set of data that they can use in their whole artwork management and labeling process. It helps us, it helps them to get rid of duplication. It helps us, it helps them to be able to standardize. It allows one common data set that can be used. And once you've got that composability, it's very easy then if you want to make bulk change. You know, I want to replace my logo today with a new logo. I want to replace this warning sign with a new warning sign. And you can quite easily search that, replace it, submit it for approval, and you can actually use technology to be able to do that and really make these changes accurately 100% all of the time and do that at pace. Once you've got that underlying and most fundamental composable mindset and structure, you can start to automate that. And the benefits of automation, you know, I say this often, you know, we as human beings, we're kind of engineered in a way to make mistakes, you know, we all do it, you know, there are, as John said, in many manual processes, checks, balances, spreadsheets, and it's quite easily, even with the most strictest of diligence, that sometimes we can make mistakes. But actually using technology and using the digital technology, you can start to build in intelligence, you can start to build in rules, you can start to build in artificial intelligence as well as machine learning that starts to take checks, balances, rules, compliance, and build them into your process through technology. That means you're always right when you execute a process because these rules invariably do not make mistakes. So the automation is very, very key to the way you mature yourselves as a digital enterprise in this space. Automation then also allows you to start to do things quicker. It allows you to start to really improve on processes around review, approval, construction. You can actually start to generate your labels, your artwork, and you can also start to use those assets across all your packaging forms. So what you're really starting to do is use digital technology, very similar to the way that John was using the example of a CD versus, you know, streaming services, you know, products like Spotify that we use out there today, where technology fundamentally changes that process and starts to drive an improved behavior and ultimately an improved results. Once you get your artwork right, once you get your labeling right, you can then start to distribute that to any channel. You can distribute to that print, you can distribute that to digital, you can distribute that anywhere around your supply chain. Imagine a scenario, and certainly here with Teleflex, where you have produced your label internally in the US, it's approved, it's gone through all the regulation, and all your manufacturing site in Asia needs to do is log on in that morning, submit that label because it's already pre-approved and checked into a print run and produce regulatory compliant labels at the touch of a button. That's the scale of the change that is taking place here at Teleflex. And once you have all this in a very centralized and a very digital, mature system, you really can start to drive insight into your processes. You can start to look at where can we get better? Where can we improve? How do we take our process that we have today and really refine that to become better and better as we progress as an enterprise? How can we easily onboard new products? We can reuse the assets that already exist in our central system of record. How do we look at acquisition? We can bring on board new organizations and actually we can very rapidly rebrand them along our guidance, along our regulatory rules, and get that acquisition done much, much faster than that, you know, the processes that you see today, with many, many companies out there. So what was it? What were the real benefits to Teleflex? You see a little call out there. As a result, product recall issues have dropped to 0 since implementation. We have been working 5 years with Teleflex. They have not had one single labeling error through the use of a digital system. I want to pause for a second there, because I'm sure many of you in your day-to-day jobs will see, examples of where potentially, or even at times, there are actually product labeling errors as a result of something not quite being right in the process before submission. Actually, at Teleflex, they have not been in that situation at all in the last 5 years. They've got one single global cloud solution. John talked about cloud when he was presenting earlier. Cloud is a very, very powerful vehicle. It allows you to very easily flatten your silos, because you're actually engaging with one system that's available anywhere around the world. And having the platform that literally leads a log on with the right access controls gives you the ability to, by default, connect your organization through just taking that approach alone. You have one common and one single process that is consistent around the world. Teleflex had multiple different templates for the same types of products. And actually what you've got now is a very reusable template that's applicable to many, many products. It's a common way of doing things. The fact that you've got this central digital solution means, as I mentioned earlier, you can rapidly onboard other business units, other product lines that can really leverage already the assets, the capability, the templates, the processes that you have. And rapid change management means you can get out to market quicker. I was talking to a different customer who were telling me that it was taking them 14 weeks to approve changes to their label before the product then essentially hit the market. That change could be done in 14 hours. Just think of the incremental revenue that could be generated from practically, 13 hours and 6 days or 5 days. That has an impact on the top line growth in any enterprise. Rapid change in the world that we're in today is very, very important. And to be able to do rapid change with the absolute confidence of being 100% compliant with regulation is really, really vital. And going back to, the point I made earlier, why just being generally organized isn't good enough to really lead in this space in the world that we are today. And as you can imagine, technology ultimately also has an impact on the bottom line. Teleflex have been able to yield, significant savings through this process, which then can be reinvested back into the product and other areas that ultimately then have a bigger benefit for their customers, for their consumers, and most importantly, for the patients who then are really at the end of the line of the products that are being used by Teleflex. So I want to now just end on that point and really open it up for questions and answers. And thank you once again for giving me the opportunity to present to you today. Okay, so we've got quite a few questions coming through the Q&A chat. So I'm going to pick up the first question. And John, I may, if it's okay with you, throw this over to you. So the first question coming from the audience is, why is composability so important to be successful?
Yeah, thanks, Gurdeep. When I look at this, I think about just, businesses' appetite for targeted digital innovation, and I could kind of go back to the music, right? So we had digital music, we had ways that we've done things forever, but the innovation of streaming music was enabled through the composability aspect, right? So I think without that approach to composability, we really are limited in our digital innovation. And you'd mentioned AI, right? So there's a lot of talk about AI. And I can pretty much assure anybody that if they're managing most of their data in a spreadsheet, AI is in their very, very long distant future, right? Like you're not going to be able to leverage that digital innovation around AI or generative AI or any of those aspects if you don't have your content and your systems in a composable, system, a composable architecture. So I think that's one of the key things is there is that business appetite, right? We need to be more accurate. We need to be faster. We need to leverage resources better, lower cost. And composability, that concept and having that in the tools and approaches is really critical. And I think, another aspect is if we want to change, if we want change management or change our business processes, how we operate, and move from how we've done things the past 20 years to how we want to do things in the future. Again, that composability is a key aspect that we have to have integrated, in our software, in our tools, in our processes.
Thank you, John. Okay, let me take another question. Just slightly change the tack on this. So this is another question from the audience. It's, does the digital LAM also have inbuilt function to check the regulatory compliance digitally without human intervention through automation? So let me pick that up. Absolutely, it does. Back to some of the comments I made about mindset. One of the things that we see often is that there's a lot of regulatory checks that are assigned to spreadsheets. There are a lot of regulatory checks that are done quite manually using sort of manual tools to be able to do that. If you really look at a digital solution, the digital solution typically comes with 2 or 3 different types of regulatory checks and intelligence that can be built into the tooling. Number one, often you get phrases, you get assets, you get artwork, you get symbols that can be wrong. So it's really important to be able to have each of the components and each of the content approved to be able to be used in the right compliant way. So it's really bringing a first level of compliance into what you use onto your artwork and your label. The second level is where you take compliance and automate that into basically the intelligent template, as we call it. So this is the look, the feel. So the great example is that, if you go to Germany, if you're producing a warning symbol on your label, it can be no smaller than a size 7 font. You can actually build that into the technology where it can automatically size warning symbols, any other regulatory rules you want from a technical point of view. Thirdly, then you can start to build intelligence into how a label is constructed. You can start to build logic into, very simply, if it's in this jurisdiction, it needs X, Y, and Z. If it's in another jurisdiction, it may need something else. So what you can start to do is really build a multi-layered approach to the way you bring automation into and intelligence into your process, into a digital solution, and effectively remove those human checks that you would have. You can even take that further where you can have, as we do in our tool, review and approval to technology, which actually highlights what are the differences, what are the things that go wrong, or even, restricts people from putting things into the system. So really, it's a multi-layered approach that allows you to be able to build into a digital solution all of the checks that you would make from a compliance point of view as a human. And that guaranteed then it will work 100% of the time. Okay. On the same sort of theme here, question, what are the features of Kallik that automate label creation? One of the things that we find is that when we go into customers, they will have obviously loads of assets. Those assets could be in different systems, as well as, artworks and labels that they have produced. We have an automated tool. It's a tool that we call Atom. And what that tool does is it will take any form of artwork, content, data that you may have in your existing systems, and essentially we deconstruct that and we reconstruct it back into two things. One, any content, so it could be symbols, it could be artwork, it could be images, warning symbols, ISO symbols, and we create a repository for you of those symbols. The second thing then is we create phrases, text that you may have on your artwork as well. And then thirdly, we create what we call an intelligent template where we marry those two together. So essentially what we do in our tool is we take your artwork, we deconstruct it, we then reconstruct it back into a composable structure that you can then use in the tool to be able to then essentially leverage the digital capability of the platform. Again, linked to that is AI part of our processes. Absolutely, yes, we have that both at the the uptake of the artwork. We also have it in latter stages of the process as well. Yeah. Okay, bear with me. There's quite a lot of questions coming hot and fast in here. Yeah. Right, next question is from Robin Crawford. In the case of RLD update, how can organized land be helpful, specifically on compliance, ideal time to adopt and implement RLD updates and cost savings to help reduce write-offs for existing artworks? I think it really goes back to just some of the points, Robin, I made earlier, really, because this is something that should be adopted upfront in your processes. It's all about how you organize the data into a single source of truth that gets leverage. You take out duplication, you take out errors, you create one single approved source of truth. And from that, then you can start to build the intelligence around the construction of that through the smart templates, the rules that I've talked about, and really take out the errors, take out the mistakes that get made very much early on in those processes that you don't see further downstream, and therefore you get the benefit much more early on, improve your compliance, and ultimately reduce your cost savings as well. Very happy to take that one offline as well if you want to sort of explore that more, but that's essentially really how you solve that. Okay. I've got questions just around the Kallik LAM processes, and will we demonstrate that today? Unfortunately, we haven't got time to address that today, but what we can do is obviously we have got a record of all of the questions. We can pick that up offline or run a separate webinar should there be needed one, just to walk through those processes for you. Yeah. Okay. Next question is from the pharmaceutical side. Right first time is very difficult to achieve in pharmaceutical labeling. When looking at content of pharma labeling, how is right first time achieved? This question is from Penny. Penny, one, it's along the lines of just some of the things that I've shared, but also secondly, it's about how you leverage the core common data set and the content that's held there. You know, we have integration tools that really allow us to be able to stream data from the CCDS into the asset manager, the phrase manager. So you're actually starting to use that as approved content that then go into your labeling processes, and then really leveraging our platform to be able to then really follow the steps I've outlined earlier to ensure you have that regulatory compliance through the checks, the balances, and the control, and the intelligence that we built into our solution. Next question is around review and approval. How does the solution, how does a digital platform help with the review and approval? The digital platform is a single platform that's available to all stakeholders. The way we really think of the personas in the solution is really those individuals who are responsible for the labeling and the artwork process, so physically creating, changing, managing, editing, and then those individuals who are part of the review and approval process. What the tool does is, what the platform does is actually provide an automated review and approval process, approval technology, should I say, that highlights and calls out everywhere you see a change from the baseline. It also allows you to compare that with any documents you may have outside the system as well. So essentially what you've got is technology that allows you to hone in on what you need to look at and how you can check that against the rules that you have set up in the system and enable you to be successful in getting it right first time. You can also generate reports from that. You can generate real-time examples as well from that. And ultimately, every change, comment, review, approval is tracked at a very granular level. So you can see all the history behind that as well. So should you ever be in a situation, not that a tool like this allows that, where something has gone right through the process and there may be a potential error, you can actually go back through the whole audit history to understand exactly why that may have not been picked up. But part of our solution is a very core review and approval tool that allows you to really do that through technology as well. Another question around the solution as well. Does the system have a vendor portal capabilities where labels can be shared with third-party manufacturers? Absolutely, it does. This is a cloud-based solution. You can share whatever you wish to do so with whatever access rights you want to really be able to set that up. So if you have 4 or 5 different third-party manufacturers that may be working on different products, you can actually share only those products pertinent to that manufacturer. Likewise, if you have another entity that you want to give visibility of all of it, you can do that as well. So that's one of the powerful benefits of a single system of record, a single platform that also is a cloud-based platform that you can actually share with them, whoever you choose to, with the right access controls as well. Just bear with me as I scroll through the questions. Another question coming up there, really around the inbuilt checks on the regulatory compliance, very much along the lines I shared about earlier. Again, some more questions, very similar to, access and who else can have that. Another question around barcode readability checks. Absolutely, that is part and parcel of the solution that we provide. And then there are questions, a few questions really around spacing on packaging, and really how do you solve constraints on spacing. And look, what we do here is we work with enterprises. We look at how we actually start to bring better use of real estate into the way that labels are created, create then templates that can be reused and really drive benefits. A good example is that we're working currently with a healthcare provider who have around about 15 different products that are really sold into 26 countries in Europe. And what we've really helped them do is to rationalize that into a common and a single design that they can really share and leverage it. And out of that, we've helped them with spacing and really how they've used their real estate on their labels much more effectively to get the right information to the right audience on that as well. Okay, bear with me as I'm scrolling through the Q&A here. Just a few asks there, really asking for obviously the presentation slides to the webinar, which actually we will share that out as well. Robin, I'm conscious of time. I'm wondering whether I hand back over to you because I know we're approaching the top of the hour as well.
Do you want to answer one more question or give final remarks, and then I'll take it from here?
Yeah, look, I'm very happy to sort of give final remarks, if that's okay, and obviously I'll hand over to John as well. But look, once again, thank you to RAPS and thank you to the audience today, really listening to it. I hope it's allowed you to think very differently about artwork management and labeling, and what really it means, A, from a significance to your enterprise and your business, but most importantly, why the digital maturity of this process is critical to drive success, both from a regulatory compliant point of view, but ultimately, really, in terms of outcomes to your consumers, your patients, your customers, and also to your business enterprise as well. John, I don't know if you want to wrap up with any closing remarks from Gartner.
Yeah, no, just thank everyone, and I think the value of this type of webinar is extremely high, and I think we can see from the questions, which I would maybe flip those to say those are current challenges. Many of the aspects that were asked about are addressed through the tools that are out there. So I think it's really about informing what are the capabilities, again, like you say, what is the art of the possible, and then just getting that across our different stakeholders in our organization so we can start to make progress around this digital innovation.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. Robin, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. RAPS would like to thank Kallik's Gurdeep Singh and Gartner's John Blake for sharing their expertise with our RAPS audience. The Q&A log will be sent to Kallik to continue to respond to any questions that they didn't get to today. The survey link and completion code have been posted in the chat box. You'll also receive an email with this information. And at this time, this concludes the webcast today. Go out there and make it a great day. Goodbye, everyone.